Welcome to another Soccer Down Here 1v1. I'm Jason Longshore, and I'm joined today by Chris Smith, head of the Soccer Academy for Celtic Football Club. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much for inviting me down.
What brings you to the US, first off?
So we're just over here in business for a couple of weeks. We always have a trip this time of the year that coincides with the United Coaches Convention. So there was myself and two other colleagues were out in Anaheim for a week at the event. A little bit of delivery at the event, both from a kind of practical point of view and a theoretical point of view, and then just a little bit of kind of business that we do as well. And then we always kind of tail off that part of the trip with a visit to a couple of our partners. So we have a partner here in Atlanta, TISA, so Tucker Youth Soccer Association. So we just stopped by for a couple of days to do a little bit of coach education with them before we head off back to Scotland.
Why is it important for you to have a partner club like here in Atlanta, Tucker Youth Soccer Association, a legacy club here in the Atlanta area? What is the importance for you and Celtic to partner with clubs like TISA?
Yeah, I think the key reason why we work in this international space is really just about kind of engaging with our fan base. There's a huge Scottish and Irish diaspora all around the world, and we need to try and find ways as a club to go and engage with them. And this international academy allows us to go and do that. We really try and spread that right the way throughout the world. We're fortunate and maybe coincidental that we have one here in Atlanta, but we've got 16 partner clubs across North America. We've got 35 in total across the globe. We have a really kind of strong footprint in Australia as well. So a lot of the times it's a little bit by chance. We'll have people reach out to us who are working at clubs, and then we'll have a conversation which can potentially lead to a partnership. So, as I said, quite fortunate that we've ended up here in Atlanta. TISA reached out to us and we had a conversation and realised that what they were trying to do as a club and what we were trying to do over here aligned really well. It's a big international space that we work in, so yeah, it's really just about trying to engage with the fan base around the world.
And it's interesting here in Atlanta, there's been a couple of players who've had Celtic ties who've come through the club. Andrew Gutman here, that was, I believe, a transfer from Celtic to Atlanta. Didn't get the opportunity to play at Celtic because of work permit issues, but now all the Atlanta United fans are going to be happy to hear about the connection with Yorgos Giacomakis, and that's ended up being very good for Atlanta. So thank you on behalf of Atlanta United fans for Yorgos' development. Beyond that, look, how does these kind of partnerships with clubs in the U.S., how does it benefit Celtic beyond maybe just the fan base side of it?
Yeah, to be honest, it doesn't really benefit the club from a footballing point of view. We don't enter into these partnerships with a view to try and talent ID players. There's really strict FIFA regulations around the identification of minor players out with your own territory. So from a footballing perspective, it's not something that we look at. We don't partner with a club and go, right, can we find the best player at that club? Can we bring them to our academy? Like, the reason why we go into this, as I touched on previously, is about trying to grow the global footprint of the club. We'll look to try and engage with our fan base, and then we'll look to try and, I say give a little bit back to the game, but we've got some excellent staff in at the club. When we get a chance to work with a partner club anywhere in the world, we'll have an opportunity just to try and improve that club or help them take the next step in their journey. So that's where we kind of look to fit into the kind of pyramid system. It's not really kind of from a talent ID or from a kind of player development point of view.
So from that partner club side of it, it's almost like a foundation play in a lot of ways, like kind of like you said, giving back to the game, using your staff's expertise to help those partner clubs deliver better programming, right?
Yeah. So when we first have a conversation with a club, we will essentially present to them all the different programs that we can deliver. So we've got 3 different pillars that we operate in. We've got a team training pillar, a player development pillar, and a coach education pillar. And across those 3 pillars, we've got about 14 or 15 different programs. So anytime we chat with a club for the very first time, it's a case of like, where are you in your journey? What do you want to achieve as a club, and how do you want to grow? Do you think there's any programs from that suite that will help you on that journey? And if there are, let us know, and then we'll try and get to the point where we can have a partnership. And I think pre-COVID, the international partnership program for Celtic's been around, I think, for about 12 or 13 years, and I've been involved for 4 now. I started, believe it or not, day 1 of COVID.
Wow.
So came in at a very tricky time, but COVID was quite good for us in a sense that it allowed us just to take a step back and reevaluate how our partnership program worked and could we change it. So we changed the model of it to get to this point where we could start to offer a suite of programs to clubs, and really allow them to dictate what programs became part of their partnership, as opposed to pre-COVID we only had 4 or 5 programs in every partner club. pretty much had to take those 4 or 5 programs.
Right.
So we're now at a point where we can really help clubs make that next step in their journey, because they're telling us we want to make sure that our coaches are a little bit better, or we want to focus on experiences for our players. So whatever direction their journey is taking them, we think we can now fit into that by giving them that little bit of flexibility.
Interesting. So the academy at Celtic, and you can explain this a lot better, it's almost like 2 tracks. So you have the academy for the professional development of players coming through, but then what you do is more, it's like I said, kind of a foundation play, but also that interaction with the fan base internationally, right? So it's 2 different tracks.
Yeah, so we've got our youth academy at Celtic, which is headed up by Chris McCart, and that's an academy for all the boys and girls that want to become professional players.
Okay.
And then we've got the soccer academy, which is the department I look after. That encompasses kind of twofold. Kirsty Cunningham heads up everything we do in Scotland from a kind of community football perspective. That's like what we class as our domestic soccer academy. Yeah. And then we have Jose Romero and Ray Hewitt, who head up our international programs, and they look after a couple of different territories. Everything we do from a football perspective is based on what the academy do. So the academy's principles, how they want to develop players, all their values, that's what we essentially deliver on our side. But we don't mandate that any club we partner has to take them on. I think it's really, really key nowadays that we have all across the world, there are a lot of really big community football clubs who have a lot of history and a lot of tradition, and there's a lot of really, really intelligent people in those clubs, and they've created their own game models, they have their own principles, they have their own values. Our job as a club is not to come in and implement ours on top of theirs. That's not how it works. We want them to keep their legacy, to keep their traditions, to keep their values. We just provide them with a little bit of support. So if they look for support within a kind of technical mindset, that's what we'll offer. If they're looking for support a little bit more strategically, we can offer that as well. So essentially, the 2 academies at Celtic work really, really closely together, but we don't try and implement our style of play or our philosophies or our identity onto other clubs.
Right, that makes total sense. During your time in your role, how have you seen the U.S. be a part of it? Has it changed over your time in the role in terms of the U.S. fitting into Celtic's strategy? Yeah,
so we do have a strategy for North America. It's largely down to the fact that, as I said at the very start, there's a huge Scottish and Irish diaspora over here. We have a ton of Celtic fans, we have a ton of engagement, and it's really trying to kind of reach out to those. We would love to get to the point. It's funny, initially we had this grand idea of trying to have a partner club in every state, because we have fan bases all around. Yeah. Even if you go look at all the supporters clubs and where they are state by state, there's a huge number of them. That's probably pretty unrealistic. What we've actually found is a better tool is to find a club that's a really good partner and then look to grow that partnership. And Tyza here in Atlanta is probably a really good example of that, where we're coming to the end now of a 3-year deal, and we're currently looking at extending for 3 more years, but we're now looking to kind of grow that partnership. So excellent. I think the right thing for us is to try and find really good partners who we can really help along their journey, and then just make sure that partnership is really strong. A partnership for me, in an ideal world, we would have kind of 3 or 4 touch points over the course of the year. And a touch point for me is either our staff coming over here to work, or their players or their coaches coming over to Scotland. We don't have any staff that work for Celtic who don't currently work for the club in Scotland. It's part of our USP. I think there's a lot of clubs who work in this international space who essentially will somehow commercially give away the rights of their name, and they'll have US-based coaches wearing the colours or the badge of a club that's based somewhere else in Europe. And our USP is that all of our staff work in Scotland, so any time we come over here to Atlanta, for example, we'll fly staff in, they'll do a little bit of work, we'll fly staff back home. And that way we really retain our identity as a football club. So North American-wise, I said we'd love to try and grow. We've got 16 partners at the moment. I think we'd love to try and get to 25 initially, but I'd rather it was 25 strong partners, big partners, than getting to 52 small partners who we do like 1 or 2 bits of activity with every single year.
Yeah, that's always the balancing act when you're doing programming like this, because you can always get into that habit of chasing numbers, but it's about the quality and it's about the depth of what you're providing, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, if I think to the programs that Tyza have as part of that partnership, we'll visit them. We come over here every January, every summer, and then we're looking at a 3rd trip now as part of the new partnership for later in the year. They will send coaches over to our convention in April. They will have a team that comes over on a tour during the summer, and we're now looking at providing an opportunity for 2 of their academy staff to come to Scotland for a week to be embedded within our academy. So we can create these 5 or 6 touch points, which provides their coaches with really, really good access to our staff, and the players to really good access to our staff. And then we've got the experiential part where we can work with one of our partners in Spark Sport to bring them across to Scotland, so they get that experience of what it's like to train and play at Celtic.
What kind of feedback do you get from American players and clubs who get that opportunity to come over and kind of get embedded?
Yeah, they love it. They love it. So we've got a couple of different programs that we can offer. The majority of visits when it comes to players coming across to Scotland is essentially what you would class as a team tour. Mm-hmm. So they'll take 8 to 10 days. It's essentially just like a holiday where they'll come over, potentially with their family or as part of their team, and they'll just experience what it's like to be at Celtic. So they'll train at our training ground, they'll get to go and watch the men's team or go and watch the women's team, they'll get a stadium tour, they'll get to see a little bit of Scotland. For players that get a chance to do that, it's just a really cool experience. It's one of those trips that you'll remember forever. Yeah. When you're young, you get to go abroad and play football with your friends and maybe play against a couple of Scottish teams while you're there. So we've got the kind of experiential part of it, but again, for some of our bigger partners, we have another programme called the Academy Player Experience. So if they do have players who they think are pretty talented, we have the opportunity to bring them across to Celtic and actually embed them into our academy for a week.
Excellent.
So we've got at Celtic we have a partnership with a school called St Ninians, and St Ninians is essentially where all of our academy players train, because they all attend the same school and they'll train through the week, so they'll get about 8 training sessions. So the players that come across for this academy player experience will attend that school for the week. So they'll go to math, they'll go to English, they'll go to biology, they'll go to chemistry, but they'll train 8 times throughout the course of the week. And because that's what our academy players do. And ultimately it's just a playing experience for them. Can they take away some lessons from it? Can it enthuse them to go and work a little bit harder and essentially just give them that experience of what it's like to be in a professional academy in Europe?
And that's kind of that connection point. I think a lot of people, when they look at what you do, they're like, oh, you're going to bring players over. That's that spot where it's players come over, they get embedded in it, and you can build a relationship if it's the time to build a relationship. But it's more about the opportunity and the experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working with young players here. We love the opportunity to try and make players better. The reality is, if we're going to be over here for a week at a time, you're not going to make a player a lot better within a week. We can try and influence their experience, make sure they really enjoy it, pass on some good information. But by having a number of different programs, we might have touch points with players 3 or 4 times. One of the other partners we have in the US is a club called Yardley Makefield Soccer. They're based in Pennsylvania. They've been partners with us now for 10 years, maybe 11. And what's really interesting with that partnership is because of the length of time, we've actually had touch point with certain players, like on numerous occasions over the course of 10 years, and you're starting to see players come through. So we'll go out to Yardley and we'll have players come up to us who've worked with us in previous programs because we've built a relationship with them, and we actually have now started to have a small influence on their development. So as I said, I think we've built our program really well to provide us with the opportunity to try and have an impact on player development, as difficult as that can be when you're living 3,000 miles apart.
Right, yeah, that's the balancing act. It sounds like you guys have that in alignment really well. In your mind, how much has the U.S. increased in importance overall to Celtic? With Cameron Carter-Vickers there now, you do have a player component, but also just feels like the market here has definitely grown from a business perspective as well. How important is the US to Celtic?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to comment on it from a kind of footballing perspective because, again, that sits within a different department within the club. We have a recruitment department who will look at that from a talent identification point of view. And you're right, we have Cameron Carter-Vickers at the moment in the men's team. And I think off the top of my head, we have 4 US players playing in a women.
That's right. Team. I wasn't sure the number, but yeah.
I think it's 4 that we have at the moment. And so from that perspective there, it's a great market for us. For our department, it makes good sense. It's, as I've said a couple of times now, we've got a great fan base over here. It's a great way to go and engage with them. We've got really good relationships with clubs over here, and generally speaking, every time we speak to clubs over here, we find people at the top end of the club who know what they're talking about, understand how to run their club properly, and that makes good sense. We want to make sure that the partnerships we have align with us. Anytime we have a conversation with a new partner, we'll do a fair bit of due diligence on them. And a big part of that is an audit process where we'll look at how the club's governed, how the club's organised. Do they have the right staff? Do their staff have the right coaching qualifications? Do they have police checks, etc.? So when we go through this kind of this governance process and this audit process, that generally takes kind of 3 or 4 months, and that gives us a lot of time to go and actually just get to know the partner, because we need to make sure that the partnerships align. And generally speaking, it's easier for us to have those conversations with clubs over here. So it's a good market for us. We enjoy it. The US is a great place. There's a ton of opportunity over here. So really for us, it's about trying to find the right opportunity that works for our club, but also works for the partners that we chat to.
I'll end with this one. You mentioned the women's team and just the growth of the women's game worldwide is just a fascinating topic to me. How much in your role has the girls playing and the women's game grown over your time at the club?
Yeah, huge. As I said, I've been at the club now for 4 years. The women's team at the club really has been kind of running since like 2007.
Yeah.
That's when the club kind of took hold of it and has been driving it forward. But I say the real growth in the game from the women's side has been in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Fran Alonso, who was the head coach, who's recently departed and now in charge at Houston Dash, he had real success at the club. I think in his time it'll be 2 Scottish Cups, 2 Champions League qualifications and a League Cup in the last 3.5 years. So really successful period. But I think just the numbers have grown. Like so I worked 2 years ago. I was assistant coach, or one of the assistant coaches for the women's team. And we were playing a home game, which you were lucky if you had 100 fans there. Right. And we're now at the point where we've got 500 coming to every single game.
Excellent.
Which for the women's team is huge.
Yeah.
Last season, they were 2 minutes away from winning the league. In the last league game of the season, they held it at Celtic Park and had 15,500 fans there.
I saw that,
which is phenomenal. And that's now the league. I mean, we broke the league record for fans attending a women's game 2 weeks in a row. We had I think it was 9,500 roughly. The first game, and then 2 weeks later we had the second game, we had 15,500. So there's real interest in it. The club's now really invested in it, as we've got full-time staff within the women's set up right away from the first team, now filtering down through the academy. They've got age groups that are running there from 18s, 16s, 14s and 12s. And 12s we have a kind of hybrid with our department where we run a girls elite programme. So Kirsty looks after that. And she's developed that now into 2 centres where we have an opportunity for the best young players around Glasgow to come and train 1 or 2 nights a week, and then that kind of starts to filter some of those players into the academy. So right. It's growing really well. I think you would always say we could do more, but I think where the club's at the moment compared to where the club was kind of 5 to 10 years ago within the women's game, it's come on leaps and bounds, and a really exciting space to be in. We've got a new manager in place now, Elena Sudoku, who I think should be an excellent fit for the club. It's great to have a strong female lead at the top end of the game there, so I'm really excited to see how she gets on in the next kind of 2 or 3 years.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. When I can get Jarrett Smith, who's one of our contributors here on SDH, longtime Celtic fan, when we can get him over to Glasgow, I'm going to connect him with you if you can take care of him, okay?
Yeah, do that, no problem at all.